I've been working as a mortuary technician at Hillcrest Memorial Services for almost 2 years now. The facility sits on the northern edge of town, where the residential neighborhoods give way to farmland and empty lots. It's a single-story building with cream-colored walls and a parking lot that never holds more than 5 cars at once. Most people don't think about places like this until they have to. By then, they're usually too occupied with grief to notice much about the building itself or the people who work inside it. My official title is Preparatory Specialist. I handle the initial stages of body preparation, cleaning, positioning, documentation. The embalming itself is done by our 2 licensed morticians, Mr. Reeves and Mrs. Dalton, both of whom have been in the profession for over 30 years. My job exists in the space before theirs begins. I receive the deceased from the hospital, the coroner, or the medical examiner. I verify identification, photograph for records, complete the intake paperwork, and perform the preliminary wash. It's methodical work, quiet work, the kind that requires attention to detail and a certain comfort with silence. Before this, I worked as a nursing assistant in a long-term care facility. I was good at it, patient and organized, but the emotional weight of watching people decline over months and years eventually wore me down. When my grandmother passed away 2 years ago, I accompanied my mother to Hillcrest to make the arrangements. The funeral director who met with us was calm and professional, treating the situation with a matter-of-fact dignity that I found oddly comforting. He didn't offer empty platitudes or speak in hushed, artificial tones. He simply explained what would happen, what we needed to decide, and what the process would look like. It was honest, clear, and in that clarity, I found something I hadn't expected: a sense of purpose. 3 weeks after my grandmother's funeral, I saw a job posting for Hillcrest. They were looking for someone with medical or caregiving experience to assist in the preparation room. The pay was slightly better than what I'd been making at the nursing home, and the hours were predictable. I applied. Mr. Reeves interviewed me himself, asking straightforward questions about my tolerance for solitude, my ability to follow detailed procedures, and whether I had any religious or personal objections to working with the deceased. I answered honestly. He hired me the following week. My training lasted 6 weeks. Mr. Reeves walked me through every step of the intake and preparation process, explaining not just what to do but why each action mattered. Proper positioning prevents lividity pooling. Thorough documentation protects the facility from liability. Careful cleaning preserves the dignity of the deceased and makes the embalmer's job easier. He spoke about the work with a kind of quiet respect that had nothing to do with sentimentality and everything to do with precision. The preparation room is in the back of the building, accessible through a locked corridor that requires a keycard. It's a large, windowless space with white tile floors, stainless steel tables, and industrial lighting that makes everything look flat and shadowless. There are 2 preparation tables, a wall of cabinets holding supplies, a deep sink with a pull-down sprayer, and a wheeled gurney for transferring bodies from the intake area. The air is kept cool, around 62 degrees, and the ventilation system runs constantly, creating a low hum that becomes background noise after the first few weeks. I work the evening shift, 4 days a week, from 4 in the afternoon until midnight. Most intakes happen during the day, but there are always evening and overnight deaths that need to be processed before the next morning. The work suits my temperament. I've never been someone who needs constant social interaction or stimulation. I like routines. I like tasks with clear beginnings and endings. And I've never been particularly uncomfortable with death. It's part of life. It happens to everyone. The body is just the vessel that remains afterward. My mother didn't understand my decision to take this job. She thought it was morbid, a reaction to grief that I'd eventually regret. But she's never been someone who could separate emotion from practicality. My father, who passed away when I was 16, was different. He worked in quality control at a manufacturing plant, spending his days checking measurements and verifying specifications. He used to say that most people didn't appreciate the importance of someone who could look at a problem without getting emotional about it. I think he would have understood this work. During my first 3 months, I focused entirely on learning the procedures. There are more of them than you'd expect. Every body that comes through Hillcrest follows a specific protocol, documented in a 3-ring binder that lives on the counter near the preparation tables. The binder is divided into sections: intake, identification verification, preliminary wash, positioning, storage, and special cases. Each section contains detailed instructions, written in clear, clinical language. I read through it twice during my training and have referred back to it countless times since. The special cases section was the longest, covering everything from bodies with infectious diseases to those that had undergone autopsies to remains that were badly decomposed or damaged. Mr. Reeves told me that most of my work would fall into the standard categories, but that I should familiarize myself with all the procedures so I wouldn't be caught off guard. Preparation work requires a calm mind, he said. If you panic or hesitate, you make mistakes. Mistakes here are permanent. There's no redoing this kind of work. He was right. In 2 years, I've prepared over 200 bodies, and I've never felt panicked. Occasionally uncomfortable, yes, particularly early on when I was still adjusting to the physical realities of the work. But never panicked. The procedures keep you grounded. As long as you follow them, step by step, the work unfolds predictably. It was during my 4th month that Mr. Reeves introduced me to the secondary protocols. He called me into his office one afternoon before my shift began. His office is small and cluttered, with filing cabinets lining 2 walls and a desk covered in paperwork, coffee mugs, and industry journals. He gestured for me to sit, then pulled a thin, spiral-bound booklet from his desk drawer and set it in front of me. The cover was plain, with no title or label, just a blank gray cover and a single piece of tape holding the spiral binding together. "These are the additional procedures," he said. "They're not in the main binder because they don't apply to every case. But when they do apply, they're mandatory. No exceptions." I picked up the booklet and flipped through it. There were maybe 20 pages, each one containing a numbered procedure written in the same clinical style as the main binder. But the content was different, more specific, more unusual. "These procedures exist because of patterns we've observed over the years," Mr. Reeves continued. "Certain behaviors, certain occurrences. We don't fully understand why they happen, but we know that following these steps prevents complications." "What kind of complications?" I asked. He leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "The kind that disrupts the work. The kind that creates liability. The kind that makes it difficult to maintain a calm, professional environment." I looked down at the booklet again. The first procedure was titled, "If the deceased's eyes open during preparation." "This happens," I said. "Occasionally," Mr. Reeves said. "It's a physiological response. Muscle relaxation, gas expansion, completely natural. But it can be unsettling if you're not prepared for it. The procedure tells you how to handle it without overreacting." I nodded and kept reading. The procedures covered a range of situations, some familiar, others strange. If you hear vocalizations from the body, continue your work without responding. If the body's temperature does not decrease within 2 hours of intake, note it in the log and contact the senior mortician. If the deceased grips your hand or arm, do not pull away. Wait 30 seconds, then gently disengage. If you see movement in your peripheral vision while working alone, do not turn toward it. Complete your current task, then exit the preparation room and radio for assistance. I read through the entire booklet twice before looking back at Mr. Reeves. "These seem specific," I said. "They are," he said. "They're based on documented incidents. Some of them are rare. Some of them happen more often than you'd think. But all of them are real, and all of them require a specific response." "What happens if I don't follow them?" Mr. Reeves folded his hands on the desk. "Then the situation escalates. The body becomes harder to work with. The environment becomes unstable. Other staff members are put at risk. We've had technicians quit over situations that could have been avoided if they'd followed the procedures. We've had damage to equipment. We've had disruptions that delayed services for grieving families. These protocols exist to prevent that." "Understood," I said. He nodded. "Good. Keep the booklet with you during your shifts. Refer to it when needed. And if you encounter something that isn't covered, Stop what you're doing and call me immediately. Do not improvise. I took the booklet with me when I left his office. That night, I read through it again in the break room before starting my shift. The language was calm and instructional, the same tone as the main procedures. But the content unsettled me in a way the standard protocols didn't. Not because it seemed irrational, but because it didn't. The instructions were too specific, too detailed to be hypothetical. Someone had written them based on experience. Multiple someones, probably. And that meant these things had happened before. Repeatedly. I kept the booklet in my coat pocket. For the first 2 weeks, I didn't need it. My work continued as it had before. Routine intakes, standard preparations, nothing unusual. But I found myself more aware of small details I'd previously ignored. The way the fluorescent lights hummed at a slightly different pitch when I was alone in the preparation room. The way the temperature sometimes felt uneven, colder near the tables than near the door. The way shadows fell in the corners of the room, just outside the reach of the overhead lights. It was during my 3rd week with the secondary protocols that I encountered my first situation requiring them. I was preparing an elderly man who had died of heart failure. Standard case. No autopsy. No trauma. He'd been brought in from a hospice facility that afternoon, and I was performing the preliminary wash before Mr. Reeves arrived to begin embalming the next morning. I'd already completed the identification verification and photographed the body for records. I was halfway through washing his arms when his left hand closed around my wrist. The grip was firm. Not violent, but unmistakable. His fingers wrapped around my wrist and held. I froze. My first instinct was to pull away, but I remembered the procedure. If the deceased grips your hand or arm, do not pull away. Wait 30 seconds, then gently disengage. I stayed still. I counted. 1, 2, 3. The hand didn't move. The grip didn't tighten or loosen. It just held. 10 seconds. 15. I kept my breathing steady. I didn't look at his face. I kept my eyes on my wrist, on his hand, on the tiles beneath the table. 25 seconds. 30. I gently rotated my wrist and slid it free. The hand fell back to the table, limp and still. I stepped back and exhaled. My heart was beating faster than normal, but I wasn't panicking. I'd followed the procedure. Nothing bad had happened. I finished the wash without incident. I logged the grip in the secondary protocol notebook, a small leather-bound journal Mr. Reeves had given me for tracking unusual occurrences. Then I completed my shift and went home. The next morning, I mentioned the incident to Mr. Reeves when he arrived for the embalming. He listened, nodded, and checked my log entry. "Good," he said. "You handled it correctly. That's the most important thing." "Does it mean anything?" I asked. "The grip," he shrugged. "It means the body's nervous system was still active in some capacity. It means you encountered a situation that required the protocol. That's all. Has it happened to you?" "Many times," he said. "You'll get used to it. The more you work here, the more you'll encounter. Just keep following the procedures." I did. Over the following months, I logged 6 more incidents that required the secondary protocols. Twice, I heard vocalizations, low, wet sounds that came from the chest cavity, caused by residual air being expelled as the body settled. Once, I saw movement in my peripheral vision while working alone, a shadow that seemed to shift near the storage lockers. I followed the procedure, completed my task without turning toward it, then exited and radioed Mr. Reeves. He came down, checked the room, and told me everything was fine. "Tricks of the light," he said. "Fatigue. The mind filling in gaps. It happens. That's why the procedure exists. To keep you from second-guessing yourself." Another time, a body's eyes opened while I was positioning the head. I gently closed them again as instructed and applied the small adhesive pads we keep for that purpose. The eyes stayed closed. I learned to expect these things. Not frequently, but regularly enough that they became part of the rhythm of the work. Strange, yes. Unsettling sometimes, but manageable. The procedures worked. As long as I followed them, nothing escalated. The work continued. It wasn't until my 18th month at Hillcrest that I encountered something the secondary protocols didn't cover. I was preparing a woman in her early 50s who had died in a car accident. The body had come from the medical examiner's office after an autopsy, which meant the preparation work would be more involved. Post-autopsy cases require additional cleaning, repositioning of organs, and careful attention to the incisions. It's delicate work, but I'd done it dozens of times by then. I'd completed the initial wash and was beginning to reposition the organs when I noticed the body's chest moving. Not dramatically, not like breathing, just a slight rise and fall, slow and rhythmic, as though something inside were shifting. I stopped working and watched. The movement continued. Down, down. I checked the secondary protocol booklet. There was no entry for post-autopsy movement. There were entries for vocalizations, for limb movement, for temperature irregularities. But nothing for this. I set down my tools and stepped back from the table. I watched for another 30 seconds. The movement didn't stop. I radioed Mr. Reeves. He was upstairs in his office, finishing paperwork. He told me to wait in the preparation room and that he'd be down in 5 minutes. I waited. The movement continued. Slow, steady, almost mechanical. When Mr. Reeves arrived, he walked directly to the table and observed the body for a full minute without speaking. Then he turned to me. "How long has this been happening?" "Since I started repositioning," I said. "Maybe 5 minutes." He nodded. "Step outside. Wait in the corridor. I'll handle this." "Is something wrong?" "No," he said. "But this requires a different protocol. One I'll walk you through later. For now, just wait outside." I left the preparation room and stood in the corridor. The door closed behind me, and I heard the lock engage. I waited for 20 minutes. I couldn't hear anything from inside. No voices, no movement, just the faint hum of the ventilation system. When the door finally opened, Mr. Reeves looked tired. He gestured for me to come back in. The body was still on the table, but the movement had stopped. Everything looked normal, peaceful. "What was that?" I asked. Mr. Reeves walked to the counter and leaned against it, arms crossed. "There's a third set of protocols," he said. "More advanced. They're not written down. They're taught directly, one technician to another, when the situation requires it. You've been here long enough now. You're ready to learn them. Why aren't they written down?" "Because they're not procedural in the way the others are," he said. "They're responsive, adaptive. Every case is slightly different, and the steps depend on reading the situation correctly. Writing them down would make them too rigid, too easy to misapply." "What do they cover?" "Cases where the body isn't fully gone," he said. I stared at him. "What does that mean?" He met my eyes. "It means exactly what it sounds like. Most of the time, death is absolute. The body shuts down, the brain stops, and what remains is just tissue. But sometimes, in rare cases, something persists. Not consciousness exactly, not life, but something, a residual pattern, an echo. We don't have a scientific name for it because science doesn't acknowledge that it exists. But people in this profession have known about it for generations." I felt cold. "You're saying that woman was still alive?" "No," Mr. Reeves said firmly. "She's dead. Clinically, legally, biologically dead. But some part of her, some pattern of energy or neural activity, is still present in the body. It doesn't think. It doesn't feel. It just exists. And it can cause complications if not handled correctly." "What kind of complications?" "The body resists preparation. It moves in ways that make the work difficult or dangerous. Produces sounds that upset staff members or families. In extreme cases, it interferes with the embalming process itself, making it impossible to preserve the remains for viewing. That's why we have the third protocols, to help the body finish the process of letting go." I took a breath. My hands felt numb. "How do you do that?" "By giving it permission," he said. "By creating an environment where the remaining pattern can dissipate safely. It's not complicated, but it requires patience and a certain degree of sensitivity. I'll teach you, but first, I need to know. Can you accept that this is real?" I thought about the grip on my wrist, the vocalizations, the movement in my peripheral vision. All the small, strange things I'd encountered over the past 18 months. The procedures that worked even when I didn't fully understand why. "Yes," I said. "I can accept it." He nodded. "Good. Then we'll begin your training tomorrow." That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about what Mr. Reeves had said. The body isn't fully gone. Something persists. Not life, but something. I thought about all the people I'd prepared. All the hands I'd washed. All the faces I'd cleaned. All the bodies I'd positioned and documented. I treated them as objects, as tasks to be completed. But if Mr. Reeves was right, some of them had still been there in some way. Not watching, not aware, but present. The thought should have horrified me. Instead, I felt a strange sense of responsibility settling over me. If that was true, if some part of them remained, then my work mattered even more than I'd realized. I wasn't just preparing bodies for burial or cremation. I was helping them finish the process of dying. I was giving them permission to leave. The next evening, Mr. Reeves took me back into the preparation room and began teaching me the third protocols. "There's no single procedure," he explained. "Every case is different, but there are principles. First, you acknowledge the presence. You don't ignore it. You don't pretend it isn't happening. You simply recognize it, calmly and without fear. Second, you create space. You slow down. You work quietly. You avoid sudden movements or loud noises. Third, you wait. You give the body time to settle. Most of the time, that's all it takes. The presence dissipates on its own once it recognizes that the environment is safe." "What if it doesn't dissipate?" "Then you help it along," he said. "You speak to it, not out loud necessarily, but you direct your intention toward the body. You tell it that the process is complete, that it's safe to let go, that there's nothing left to hold on to. Most of the time, that's enough. The body relaxes. The presence fades. The work continues. And if that doesn't work?" Mr. Reeves paused. "Then you call me. There are some cases that require more direct intervention. Cases where the presence is stronger, more persistent. Those are rare, but they do happen. I've handled 3 in my career. Mrs. Dalton has handled 2. You may never encounter one, but if you do, you'll know. The body will resist every step of preparation. The temperature won't decrease. The limbs won't stay positioned. And you'll feel it, a weight in the room, a sense of refusal. If that happens, stop immediately and call me." Over the next 3 months, I encountered 4 cases that required the third protocols. In each case, I followed Mr. Reeves's instructions. I acknowledged the presence. I slowed down. I waited. In 3 of the 4 cases, the body settled within 20 minutes. The work continued without further incident. The 4th case took longer. It was a young man who had died of an overdose. His body was tense, rigid in a way that wasn't normal rigor mortis. I could feel the weight Mr. Reeves had described, a heaviness in the air around the table. I followed the procedure. I acknowledged the presence. I created space. I waited. After 30 minutes, nothing had changed. I directed my intention toward the body. I didn't speak out loud, but I thought the words clearly, deliberately. The process is complete. It's safe to let go. There's nothing left to hold on to. I waited another 10 minutes. Slowly, the tension in the body began to ease. The rigidity softened. The weight in the air lifted. By the time I finished the preparation, the body felt normal, peaceful. I logged the case in my secondary protocol notebook. Mr. Reeves reviewed it the next morning and nodded approvingly. "You're doing well," he said. "Better than most technicians at this stage. You have the right temperament for this work." "Thank you," I said. He looked at me for a moment, then leaned forward slightly. "There's something else you should know. Something I didn't tell you when you started here." I waited. "This work changes you," he said. "Not in a bad way necessarily, but it changes you. The longer you do it, the more sensitive you become to these presences. You start noticing them earlier. You start feeling them more clearly. Some technicians find that unsettling. They quit after a few years because they can't handle the weight of it. But others, people like you, like me, find it clarifying. We're helping these people finish something they couldn't finish on their own. That matters. But it also binds us to the work in a way that's difficult to walk away from. What do you mean, binds us? I mean that once you develop this sensitivity, it doesn't go away, he said. Even if you leave this job, even if you never work with the dead again, you'll still feel them. In hospitals, in nursing homes, anywhere people are dying or have recently died. You'll feel the presences. You'll know when someone isn't fully gone. And once you know, it's hard to ignore. It becomes part of who you are. I thought about that. Is that what happened to you? Yes, he said. I've been doing this for 32 years. I've tried to retire twice. Both times I came back within 6 months. Not because I needed the money, not because I missed the work, but because I couldn't stop feeling them. The presences, everywhere I went. And the only place I felt useful, the only place where I could actually help, was here. He stood and walked to the door, then turned back. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm just being honest. You're good at this work. You have a future here if you want it. But you should know what that future looks like. What it costs. He left before I could respond. I stood alone in the preparation room for a long time, thinking about what he'd said. The binding, the sensitivity, the inability to walk away. I should have been frightened. I should have considered quitting while I still could. But I didn't, because somewhere deep down I already knew he was right. I'd started feeling the presences more clearly over the past few months. Not just in the preparation room, but outside it. At the grocery store, I'd felt a heaviness near an elderly man who looked pale and unsteady. At a gas station, I'd felt a presence lingering near a woman who seemed fine but had that particular stillness I'd learned to recognize. I hadn't acknowledged it consciously at the time, but now, looking back, I realized it had been happening for weeks. The work was changing me, binding me, and I didn't mind, because for the first time in my life I felt like I was doing something that mattered. Something that no one else could do. Something necessary. I finished my shift and went home. I slept better that night than I had in weeks. Over the following months, I continued my work with a deepening sense of purpose. The presences became easier to read, easier to work with. I learned to distinguish between different types of persistence. Some were faint and faded quickly, others were stronger and required more time and attention. I learned to recognize the signs early, before the body showed obvious movement or resistance. Mr. Reeves began consulting with me on difficult cases. Mrs. Dalton, who had always been distant and professional, started acknowledging my presence with small nods of respect. I was no longer just a preparatory specialist. I was becoming something else, something more specialized. It was during my 22nd month at Hillcrest that I encountered my first case that required direct intervention. The body was a middle-aged woman who had died in a house fire. She'd been brought to us from the medical examiner's office, her remains badly burned and damaged. The family had requested a closed casket service, which meant my job was primarily documentation and basic preservation, not cosmetic restoration. I began the preparation as usual, but within minutes, I felt the presence. It was stronger than anything I'd encountered before. Not aggressive exactly, but unwilling, resistant. The body's temperature wasn't decreasing. The limbs wouldn't stay positioned. And the weight in the room was overwhelming, pressing against my chest like physical pressure. I followed the protocols. I acknowledged the presence. I created space. I waited. Nothing changed. I directed my intention toward the body, speaking the words silently, clearly. The process is complete. It's safe to let go. There's nothing left to hold on to. The presence didn't fade. I tried again, focusing more intently. I waited longer. 15 minutes. 20. 30. The body remained rigid. The weight in the room didn't lift. I radioed Mr. Reeves. He arrived within minutes, assessed the situation, and nodded. "This one needs help," he said. "Watch closely. You'll need to know how to do this eventually." He approached the table slowly, placing one hand on the woman's shoulder. He closed his eyes and spoke, his voice low and steady. "Your body is gone. The fire took it, but you're still holding on. You don't need to. There's nothing left to protect. Nothing left to fix. The people you love will be okay without you. They'll grieve, but they'll survive. You did your part. Now it's time to finish. He stayed like that for several minutes, hand on her shoulder, speaking quietly. I couldn't hear all of it, but the tone was calm, firm, compassionate. Gradually, the weight in the room began to lift. The body's temperature started to drop. The rigidity eased. When Mr. Reeves finally stepped back, the presence was gone. The woman's body looked peaceful. He turned to me. Some presences need permission from someone who understands what they're going through. Someone who can speak their language. You'll develop that ability with time. For now, just remember, persistence comes from fear or duty. If you can address whichever one is driving it, the presence will let go. I nodded, absorbing his words. That night, I wrote everything down in my notebook. Not just the procedure, but the feeling of it. The weight, the resistance, the shift when Mr. Reeves spoke to her. I wanted to remember it exactly, so I'd know how to recognize it if I encountered it again. I went home that night feeling something I hadn't felt before. Not quite fear. Not quite anticipation. Something in between. A recognition that I was standing at the edge of something larger than I'd understood when I first took this job. The work wasn't just about following procedures anymore. It was about understanding presences. About helping them finish what they couldn't finish on their own. And I was becoming one of the few people who could do that. 3 weeks later, I was alone in the preparation room when I felt it again. Presence. Strong. Persistent. Unwilling. This time, Mr. Reeves wasn't there. It was 11:30 at night, and I was the only person in the building. I looked at the body on the table. A man in his 70s, dead from complications of pneumonia. His face was calm, but his body was rigid in that particular way I'd learned to recognize. The temperature wasn't dropping. The limbs wouldn't stay positioned. I took a breath. I placed my hand on his shoulder, just as Mr. Reeves had done, and I began to speak. The man's name was Howard. I'd read it in the intake paperwork before beginning the preparation. Howard Jeffries, 73 years old, survived by a daughter and 2 grandchildren, retired postal worker, died at Mercy General after a 3-week battle with pneumonia. I kept my hand on his shoulder and spoke quietly, testing the words, finding the right rhythm. Howard, your body is finished. The pneumonia took it. Your lungs couldn't keep going. But you're still here, still holding on. You don't need to anymore. Your work is done. Your daughter will be okay. Your grandchildren will remember you. You did your part. I waited. The weight in the room didn't lift. I tried again, adjusting my approach, speaking more directly. You're afraid. I understand that. Letting go is frightening. But there's nothing left to be afraid of. The pain is over. The struggle is over. Whatever comes next, you're ready for it. You just have to stop holding on. I felt a shift, subtle but present. The weight lessened slightly, as though the presence were listening. It's safe, I said. I promise you it's safe. You can let go. The rigidity in Howard's body began to ease. The temperature started dropping, slowly but steadily. The weight in the room lifted degree by degree until finally it was gone. I stood there for a moment longer, hand still on his shoulder, making sure the presence had fully dissipated. Then I stepped back and exhaled. I'd done it, without Mr. Reeves, without assistance. I finished the preparation without incident and logged the case in my notebook. The next morning, I told Mr. Reeves what had happened. He listened, reviewed my notes, and nodded. Good, he said. You're ready. From now on, I'll assign you the difficult cases, the ones that need direct intervention. Mrs. Dalton and I are getting older. We need someone younger who can take over this aspect of the work. That's you now. I felt a swell of something, pride, maybe, or responsibility, possibly both. Thank you, I said. He looked at me with an expression that was hard to read. Not quite approval, not quite concern, something else. Don't thank me yet, he said. This work takes a toll. You'll see. Over the next 6 months, I handled 17 cases that required direct intervention. Some were straightforward, like Howard, presences that just needed reassurance and permission. Others were more complicated, presences driven by grief, by unfinished business, by fear so deep it had calcified into refusal. Those cases took longer, sometimes hours. I learned to read the subtleties, to adjust my approach based on what I felt from the body. I learned to speak to the different kinds of fear and duty that kept presences tethered. And Mr. Reeves was right. The work took a toll. Not physically, though the long hours and the cold of the preparation room left me perpetually tired. The toll was deeper than that. I started feeling the presences everywhere, just as Mr. Reeves had warned. At the supermarket, I felt them hovering near people who looked healthy but carried that particular stillness I'd learned to recognize. At the bank, I felt one lingering near an older woman who was cashing a check, her hands trembling slightly. At a coffee shop, I felt a strong presence near a man sitting alone in the corner, his face pale and drawn. I couldn't help these people. They were alive, technically, but something in them was already beginning to detach. I could feel the early stages of the process, the slow unraveling that precedes death by weeks or even months. And there was nothing I could do but feel it and move on. It was exhausting. I stopped going out as much. I spent my days off at home, in silence, trying to rest. But even at home, I felt them. Faint presences, distant and diffuse, drifting through the world like background radiation. Couldn't shut it off. The sensitivity Mr. Reeves had mentioned wasn't just an awareness. It was a constant, low-level drain on my energy. By my 28th month at Hillcrest, I was considering quitting. Not because I didn't believe in the work. I did, but because I wasn't sure I could sustain it. The binding Mr. Reeves had described felt more like a trap now. I was useful here, yes. I was helping people finish what they couldn't finish on their own. But I was also losing myself in the process, becoming so attuned to death that life felt distant and unreal. I scheduled a meeting with Mr. Reeves to discuss my concerns. He listened patiently, nodding occasionally, his expression unreadable. "I understand," he said when I finished. "You're at the point where most people quit. The point where the work stops feeling like a job and starts feeling like a burden. It's natural. I went through it myself around the 3-year mark." "What did you do?" I asked. "I tried to quit," he said. "I gave my notice. I took a job doing administrative work at a law firm. I lasted 6 months before I came back." "Why?" "Because I couldn't stand it," he said. "Everywhere I went, I felt the presences. People who were dying, people who had died, people who were carrying unfinished business that would eventually become a presence. I couldn't help them. I couldn't do anything except feel it. And it was worse than working here because at least here I could do something useful. Here I could help them finish. Outside, I was just a bystander." "So you're saying I can't quit?" "I'm saying you can try," he said. "But I don't think it'll work. The sensitivity doesn't go away. Once you develop it, it's permanent. You'll carry it with you wherever you go. And eventually, you'll come back. Because this is the only place where you can use it for something meaningful." I stared at him. "That's not fair." "No," he agreed. "It's not. But it's the truth. And you deserve to know it." I left his office feeling hollow, trapped, bound to a job I'd chosen freely but could no longer leave. I didn't quit. I kept working. But the weight of it grew heavier. It was during my 30th month that I encountered the case that changed everything. Her name was Alice, 19 years old, died in a car accident on the interstate, brought to us from the medical examiner's office with moderate trauma to the head and chest. The family had requested an open casket service, which meant I'd need to prepare her carefully for cosmetic restoration. I began the preparation as usual, but within seconds, I felt the presence. It was the strongest I'd ever encountered. Not resistant exactly, but vast, overwhelming. It filled the room like a physical force, pressing against my skin, my lungs, my mind. I stopped working and stepped back from the table. My hands were shaking. I radioed Mr. Reeves. He arrived within minutes, took one look at the body, and went pale. "This is bad," he said quietly. "What do I do?" "Nothing," he said. "Not yet. I need to assess this first." He approached the table slowly, cautiously, as though approaching something dangerous. He placed his hand on Alice's shoulder and closed his eyes. After a moment, he pulled his hand back and shook his head. "She's not ready," he said. "The presence is too strong, too new. She doesn't understand what happened yet. She's still trying to hold on. Can we help her?" "I don't know," he said. "This is beyond what I've dealt with before. The presence is aware. Not conscious exactly, but aware enough to resist. We need to give her time. Maybe a lot of time." "How much time?" "I don't know," he said again. "Maybe hours. Maybe days. We've never kept a body in preparation this long. But I don't think we have a choice. If we try to force the process, we could make it worse." "Worse how?" He looked at me. "The presence could anchor itself more deeply, could refuse to let go entirely. And then the body would be—" He trailed off. "Would it be unsettled?" he said. "Permanently. We'd have to cremate it. We couldn't bury it. It wouldn't be safe." I didn't ask what he meant by safe. I didn't want to know. Over the next 3 days, I stayed with Alice's body almost constantly. I acknowledged the presence. I created space. I waited. I spoke to her quietly, telling her the same things I'd told others. "Your body is finished. It's safe to let go. Your family will be okay." But the presence didn't fade. If anything, it grew stronger, more defined. I could feel it watching me now, observing me as I worked, not with hostility, but with something close to curiosity. On the 3rd day, Mr. Reeves pulled me aside. "This isn't working," he said. "The presence isn't letting go. We need to try something different." "What?" "We need to give her a reason to let go," he said. "Right now, she's holding on because she doesn't understand that there's nothing left to hold on to. But if we can show her, if we can make her understand, she might be released." "How do we do that?" "We bring her family in," he said. "We let them say goodbye. Sometimes that's enough. The presence recognizes that the people it's holding on for are okay, and it lets go." I hesitated. "Is that safe?" "No," he said. "It's not. If the presence is too strong, the family might feel it. They might see things, hear things, could traumatize them. But I don't see another option. If we don't do this, we'll have to cremate her without a service, and the family will never understand why." I thought about that, about Alice's parents, her siblings, her friends, about the service they'd planned, the open casket they'd requested, about the closure they needed. "Okay," I said, "let's do it." The next morning, we brought Alice's family in for a private viewing. Her mother, her father, and her younger brother. Mr. Reeves and I stood in the back of the room watching quietly. The family approached the casket slowly, their faces drawn with grief. Alice's mother reached out and touched her daughter's hand. She spoke softly, words I couldn't hear from where I stood. And then I felt it. The presence shifted. It moved toward the family, drawn by their grief, their love. It hovered near Alice's mother, listening. Alice's father spoke next, his voice thick with tears. He told her he loved her, that she'd done nothing wrong, that it wasn't her fault. The presence shifted again, moving between the 3 of them, touching each one briefly, as though trying to understand. Alice's brother, who looked about 16, knelt by the casket and whispered something I couldn't hear. His hand rested on hers. And then, slowly, the presence began to fade. Not all at once, but degree by degree, like smoke dissipating in a breeze. It hovered for a moment longer, as though reluctant, and then it was gone. The weight in the room lifted. The temperature normalized. Alice's body looked peaceful for the first time since I'd begun working with her. Her family stayed for another 20 minutes, saying their goodbyes, and then they left. Mr. Reeves and I returned to the preparation room. "That was the right call," he said. "You made the right decision." I nodded, but I didn't feel relieved. I felt something else, something heavier. "She was there," I said. "She was aware. She knew they were saying goodbye." "Yes," Mr. Reeves said. "So it's not just residual energy," I said. "It's not just a pattern. It's them. part of them is still there, still aware, even after death. Mr. Reeves didn't respond immediately. When he did, his voice was quiet. Yes, he said. I think it is. I stood there, absorbing that. Everything I'd been told about death, everything I'd believed, had just shifted. Death wasn't the end. Not immediately, not completely. Something persisted, something aware. What happens to them? I asked. After they let go. Where do they go? I don't know, Mr. Reeves said. I've never been able to follow that far, but I have to believe it's somewhere. Otherwise, none of this makes sense. I wanted to believe that too, but I wasn't sure I could. Over the following weeks, I continued my work with a new understanding. Every body I prepared, I treated it as though the person were still partially present. Because they were. Some more than others, some faintly and some strongly. But they were there. Watching. Listening. Waiting for permission to leave. It should have made the work harder. More emotionally draining. But instead, it made it feel more important. I wasn't just preparing bodies anymore. I was guiding people through the final stage of death. I was helping them finish something they couldn't finish on their own. And for the first time since I'd started feeling the presences everywhere, I felt a sense of peace. But that peace didn't last. It was during my 34th month at Hillcrest that Mr. Reeves called me into his office. His face was drawn, his expression grim. I need to tell you something, he said. Something I should have told you a long time ago. I sat down. What is it? There's a cost to this work, he said. Not just the toll it takes on your energy. Not just the sensitivity. There's a deeper cost. One that doesn't become apparent until you've been doing this for several years. What kind of cost? He leaned forward, his hands folded on the desk. The more you work with presences, the more you help them let go, the more connected you become to the process. You start to exist in both worlds, the living and the dying. And eventually, that connection becomes permanent. What does that mean? It means that when you die, he said, your own presence won't let go. Not easily. Not quickly. You'll linger just like the people you've been helping. And the longer you've done this work, the stronger your presence will be. The harder it'll be for someone else to help you finish. I stared at him. You're saying I'll be trapped. Not trapped, he said, but delayed. You'll need someone like us to help you let go. Someone who understands the process. And if that person isn't available, if they don't know what to do, you could linger for a very long time. How long? I don't know, he said. I've heard stories. People who worked in this profession for decades and lingered for years after death. Decades, in some cases, unable to move on because no one understood what they needed. My mouth was dry. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because I didn't want to scare you away, he said. You're good at this work. You have a gift for it. And we need people like you. But you deserve to know the truth. You deserve to understand what you're committing to. I sat there, unable to respond. I'm not telling you to quit, Mr. Reeves said. I'm just telling you to think carefully about how long you want to do this. Every year you stay, the deeper the connection becomes. The harder it'll be to let go when your time comes. I left his office and went home. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my apartment, staring at the walls, thinking about what he'd said. The cost, the binding, the permanent connection to death. I could quit now. I could walk away before the connection became too deep. I could find another job, another life, and try to ignore the presences I felt everywhere. But I knew I wouldn't, because the work mattered, because I was helping people finish something they couldn't finish on their own, and because deep down I'd already accepted the cost. The next morning, I went back to Hillcrest and told Mr. Reeves I was staying. He nodded. I thought you would. How long have you been doing this? I asked. 32 years, he said. Do you ever regret it? He thought about that for a long time. No, he said finally. But I do think about what comes after, about how long I'll linger, about whether anyone will be able to help me let go. I will, I said. When the time comes, I'll be here. He looked at me, and for the first time since I'd met him, I saw something close to gratitude in his eyes. "Thank you," he said. Over the next year, I continued my work with a quiet sense of purpose. The presences became easier to read, easier to help. I developed techniques for addressing different types of persistence: fear, duty, grief, confusion. I learned to speak to each one in the language it needed to hear, and I stopped feeling trapped, because I understood now that the binding wasn't a trap. It was a choice, commitment, a trade I'd made willingly, even if I hadn't fully understood the terms at the beginning. I was helping people finish, and when my time came, someone would help me finish too. That was enough. It was during my 41st month at Hillcrest that something changed. I was preparing a man who had died of natural causes, routine case, no complications, when I felt it. A presence, but different from any I'd encountered before. Not coming from the body, coming from somewhere else, somewhere in the room. I stopped working and looked around. The preparation room was empty except for me and the body on the table. But the presence was there, watching. I acknowledged it the way I'd learned to do. I didn't speak out loud, but I directed my awareness toward it. "I'm here. I recognize you. What do you need?" The presence didn't respond, but it didn't leave either. It just stayed, observing. I finished the preparation and left the room, but the presence followed me. Over the next week, I felt it constantly. In the preparation room, in the break room, in my car, at home. It was always there, just at the edge of my awareness. Not threatening, but persistent. Watching. I told Mr. Reeves. He listened carefully, his expression troubled. "That's not a presence from a body," he said. "That's something else." "What is it?" "I think," he said slowly, "that it's one of the ones who stayed too long. One of the technicians who worked here before us. Someone who never let go." My blood went cold. "How is that possible?" "I don't know," he said, "but I've felt it too. A few times over the years. Always faint, always distant, but it's there. Someone who used to do this work. Someone who bound themselves so deeply to the process that they couldn't leave even after death. What do they want?" "I don't know," he said. "Maybe they're just watching. Maybe they're making sure the work continues. Or maybe they're waiting for someone who can help them finish." That night, I went home and sat in the dark, feeling the presence hovering nearby. I spoke to it quietly, the way I spoke to the presences in the preparation room. "I don't know who you are. I don't know how long you've been here, but if you need help, I'll try. Just tell me what you need." The presence didn't respond, but it stayed close, patient and waiting. And I realized, with a strange sense of calm, that this was part of the work too. Not just helping the newly dead let go, but helping the ones who'd stayed too long. The ones who'd bound themselves so deeply to the process that they couldn't leave on their own. Someday that might be me, but for now I was still here, still working, still helping, and I would keep doing it for as long as I could, because this was the job I'd chosen. This was the binding I'd accepted, and I would see it through. Last night, I prepared a woman who had died suddenly of a stroke. The presence was strong but willing. She let go after only 20 minutes of quiet acknowledgement. As I finished the preparation, I felt the other presence, the one that's been following me, move closer. It stood near the table watching, and for the first time I felt something from it. Not words, not thoughts, but a sense of approval, as though it recognized what I was doing, as though it understood. I finished my work and left the preparation room. The presence followed me to my car, then faded as I drove away. But I know it'll be back, tomorrow night, and the night after, and every night after that, because this is where it belongs. Just like me, I've been doing this work for 3.5 years now. Mr. Reeves is talking about retiring again. Mrs. Dalton has started training a new assistant, and I'm being considered for a senior position. I'll probably take it, because the work matters, because someone needs to do it, and because I've already made the trade. This morning, I felt a presence at the grocery store. Faint, hovering near a man in his 60s who looked healthy but had that particular stillness. I didn't approach him. I just acknowledged the presence and moved on, because that's all I can do, for now. But someday, when he arrives at Hillcrest, I'll be there, and I'll help him finish what he can't finish on his own, just like I've helped hundreds of others. And when my time comes, when I'm the one on the table, when my presence refuses to let go, someone will be here to help me. Someone has to, because this is the work, and the work never ends.